Hi everyone, I'm Jennifer, the host of Ikigai with Jennifer Shinkai, where we're going to talk about the Japanese concept of Ikigai, or living a life of purpose. Here you're going to hear inspirational stories from all different types of people who are finding their own life of purpose. You're going to hear about how they found their Ikigai and what they do every day to live an integrated life. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to Ikigai with Jennifer Shinkai. I am your host, Jennifer Shinkai, and I'm very, very happy to have with me today my long-term mentor and absolute, we talk about multi-potentialites. I've had a few on this podcast before, but a woman with her fingers in so many pies, like always active, always doing something, the absolutely fabulous Rochelle Kopp. So thank you so much for being here, Rochelle.
And well, thank you.
Thank you. And as I threatened to share again, the story of how we met. It's one of the great stories of the power of keeping connections and the power of networking, LinkedIn, and just reminding people that you exist. So when I was leaving I was leaving the English language school that I had worked in when I first came to Japan. I was like, oh, I want to be a corporate trainer because I've been doing some in-house training. And I interviewed for Rochelle's company, Japan Intercultural Consulting. And she's like, you sound very nice. You're lovely. These are not her exact words, but her exact words were, if you want to be a corporate trainer, you need to have some corporate experience. So I went away, a little deflated, but also that's a good point. So I went off, and then 12 years later, I contacted Rochelle, I think on LinkedIn, and said, 12 years ago, do you remember me? You interviewed me. I've had some corporate experience now. Are you still looking for trainers? And delightedly, you met me for an interview and a coffee. And I'm very happy to be one of the consultants working with Japan Intercultural Consulting. And I love working with your clients. They're all amazing and the content's fabulous. And so very grateful for your amazing advice. Hang on, that's 19 years ago, because I've been running my business for 7 years this year. And for the last 7 years, your support as well. But I've just introduced you with a story about myself. So really, to be a good host, I should tell everybody who Rochelle is. So as I mentioned, multi-potentialite, so many things going on. She's a consultant, an author, a mentor, an educator, a board director. I've already mentioned about Japanese Intercultural Consulting, which is working with communication, leadership, human resources, many different Japanese companies and global companies doing business in Japan. But that's not it. Running a business, no, that's not all she does. Rochelle's also a writer. She's published over 35 books on intercultural communication and management topics. I was pleased with myself that I've got like 2 little tiny kids books out, but she's also working on writing in Japanese as well, in the Asahi and the Nikkei Sango Shimbun, so a polyglot as well. Outside director, board director to 2 Japanese companies, a mentor. And very interestingly, if you are currently in Tokyo, you may know about the Meiji Jingu Mai redevelopment plan, which is basically planning to turn this green oasis into some skyscrapers. Great plan. But her petition on change.org has now got almost, I'm gonna inflate your numbers a little bit, because I think by the time this comes out, it will almost be at 200,000 signatures. And last year she was named as one of change.org Japan's Changemakers of the Year. Whew. Welcome, Rochelle. Thank you for making the time.
Well, thank you. I'm delighted to be here
today. And several times, Rochelle was so busy. We're like, oh no, we need to reschedule. Something's come up. So I really appreciate you being here and making the time to share your views on Ikigai and your current activities as well as an activist, which is a new source of Ikigai. But let's take a step back. And as a Japan expert, I'd love to get your thoughts and around the definition or your experience of the word of Ikigai.
Well, I have been a fan of, everyone knows the three-part Venn diagram. And I think maybe I was one of the people who found it early on.
I'm
There
sure.
was a gal who had a blog called, what was it? It had the word bullshit in it, and I can't remember what it was. But anyways, I think, I actually had some interactions with people on Twitter about where the origin of where this was, and I
Yeah,
think maybe she was the one who came up with it, and other people took it from her. It's debatable,
right.
but anyways, and she's gone off to do other things. But I had actually found it and used it in a book that I published that I want to say now. I think it was 2015 I published the
Hmm.
book. So I had found it and liked that diagram pretty early on.
Right.
The book that I had was doing at the time was for Japanese and was talking about how HR needs to change in Japan and there's going to be a more fluid labor market. And the
Right.
last chapter of the book was for individuals. The main part of the book was for companies. You're going to have to change how you do HR and change the mindset. But then for the last chapter, you as individual employees, you're going to need to change how you think about your own career
Mm,
and take more of a leading role in thinking about, well, what is it that you want to do and how do you contribute rather than just doing what you've been told or taking the assignment you've been given. And so to help illustrate that, I used that diagram.
right.
And I've also used that diagram with university students
Mm,
who are trying to think about what they want to do. It's a good, so it's, I think it's a great framework. So I've always kind of liked that concept ever since I found it a while ago.
yeah. Do you have a memory of the, hearing the word ikigai sort of in your Japanese conversations before you became aware of this interpretive framework? So
No, was not aware of it before that. It's
I
not a word that I hear used frequently
right.
in regular conversations.
Yes, exactly. So one of the things which I I love to talk about is like this the Ikigai Venn diagram. It is a really great coaching tool, really brilliant career planning tool. But when people come to Japan or like thinking about, oh, how do Japanese people think about Ikigai, they're not looking at like a four-part Venn diagram. And as you said, so
No.
you've been in Japan for how long now, or been
Well, I've been
connected to
going
Japan?
back and forth
Yeah.
between Japan and the US my entire adult life, so it's been a
Right.
while.
It's been a while. We'll just leave an edge of
Yeah.
mystery there. But even someone who is so connected to Japan, fluent Japanese speaker, like it's just not really a word that gets kind of thrown around a lot in daily conversation.
No,
So
it's
there's
not.
a myth bust there. But when you think about for yourself, how you experience ikigai, what it means to you, you mentioned in our notes, you have two sources of ikigai. Can you tell me a little bit about those two sources?
Well, certainly. So one is my sort of career that I've created for myself as an intercultural consultant,
Mm,
where I had considered doing different things, and at one point I was thinking of becoming a university professor or something like that. But I realized that I enjoyed more doing the consulting because part of what really is motivating for me is seeing how I can help people. And
mm,
you obviously do that in university teaching, but it's a much more diffuse and longer term thing. Whereas when you're consulting with clients, you can see right away that you're able to help them immediately. And I found that very motivating. So by having my own company, I've been able to design a career that puts together that, what I'm good at and what I'm uniquely good at, what what people need and what I get paid for. I definitely did that three-part Venn diagram with,
mm.
creating my own firm.
Yes, definitely. And
Yeah.
yeah, and I think it's really powerful, the work that you're doing and how you're supporting that helping people, like having that idea of helping people, like making international business communication easier, less stressful, raising awareness. It's really powerful. But then you have this other newer source of Ikigai as an activist. So
Yeah, so
tell
I
us how
would,
this
if you had told me
started.
a few years ago I was going to become an activist, I would have said, "What? Are you crazy?" Although I had done a few environmental activist or anti-development activist things in the past. I can tell you about those if you want. So
Yeah, I'd love to hear
it's
that.
not like I'd never done it before, but not sort of fully jumped in the way I have with this one. And it was a little bit, I think it kind of got to be a bigger thing than I was expecting it to be. And and just to give you the whole story, it actually started not with this current Jingu Gaien project, but with another petition that I launched right before the Tokyo Olympics. And the
Ooh.
reason I did a petition at that time is that there was a plan to do public viewing sites at various different locations, with a key one at Yoyogi Park, which is the big park right next to Harajuku Station.
So tell us more about what this
Okay,
petition was about.
certainly.
Yeah.
What it was is, again, I'm kind of a Twitter addict, and I had seen a tweet by someone who lived near the park who was sharing concerns that they had seen signs in the park that said that as part of building this public viewing facility. So let me explain what a public viewing is. The
Mm.
idea is, you can't accommodate everyone at the Olympic venues, so you have these viewing facilities that have a giant, giant screen, and people gather there, and it's outside, and they drink beer and they enjoy watching the sports. Now, people who went to these for the 2019 Rugby World Cup said that they were really a lot of fun.
Yes.
So that's great if it's not in the middle of a pandemic. And so the idea that they were going to spend a lot of money building these facilities that were designed to accommodate literally thousands of people. Why would we be bringing thousands of people together in the middle of a pandemic when it really didn't even make sense to be doing the Olympics?
Yeah.
And so, that I thought, that seems pretty stupid. And also, they were going to be, as the signs in the park had said, cutting off tree limbs, and it wasn't clear how many, but the way it was phrased, it could have been all the tree limbs under, I think it was um, 3 meters or something like that. So something like that would be kind of a lot of tree limbs to be cutting
Right.
down. And I thought, this seems like a really bad idea.
Mm.
Why would you be disfiguring trees for something that is, going to only be a few weeks?
Yeah.
That's, I really didn't like that idea. And I thought, okay, I don't think that many people are really going to care about this, but I think this just sounds incredibly stupid, and someone needs to say something. And maybe this is partially my culture as an American. Like, maybe I'll speak up about it. And I had a fair number of Twitter followers, particularly on my Japanese account, because I'd already had a habit of saying my opinion in Japanese, and so there's a little bit of novelty. There's not that many
Mm.
non-Japanese who tweet in Japanese,
Right.
and I had, and also people who are fans of my books, etc. So I'd had a fair number of Twitter followers, and I thought, I've got a platform. And there had been a change.org petition by a lawyer named Kenji Utsunomiya, um, asking that the whole Olympics not go forward.
Yeah.
And that had gotten a tremendous number of signatures. I think it was 250,000 or something more than that, some huge number. And I thought, this shows that Japanese are into petitions, and that this is a thing that works in Japanese society. And I think it was kind of a new thing. And I thought, why don't I just try putting up a petition and see what happens? Well, people went absolutely crazy. I think part of what it was is, I think people were really, really frustrated in Tokyo that the Olympics were going forward, because
Yeah.
most people were not happy about it. And they weren't able to get the government to not do it, even though all these people signed the petition and they were protesting. But at least this is one thing. At least could you not do this? At
Yeah.
least could you just stop this? And so I think people just got really into it, and we ended up with 154,000 signatures. I had to take basically a week off of work because I was on Japanese TV like every day, and all these reporters were calling me, and it was just sort of crazy. And then finally, Governor Koike sort of cried uncle, and she said, okay, we're not going to hold the public viewing for the Olympics. We're still going to build the facility because, of course, they had all the contracts in place and they wanted to pay whoever. But we're going to use it as a vaccination station for policemen and firemen, which is something, of course, that you could never
You can't
criticize, right?
no. Oh, yeah, smart
No,
move.
you can't criticize that, right?
Yeah,
And then maybe we'll, if things are better by the time the Paralympics come around, maybe we'll use it for that.
yeah.
They ended up doing the trimming of the tree limbs only a few days after I'd started the petition. And so it wasn't enough time to like try and negotiate with them or get involved. But an Asahi Shimbun reporter got someone from the metropolitan government on record saying that they kept the number of tree limbs being cut to the bare minimum because they
Mm,
knew people were watching. And
right.
one of the people who lives in the neighborhood and knows, the park really, really well said that trees that were marked to have limbs cut appeared to not have them cut. And
Right.
and I went and checked that too, and it seemed that they did less than they were planning to.
Right.
And it was, and the TV was all over it. It was a big thing. So,
Mm,
but that was basically, that was pretty much the best outcome you were going to get from that. So that was successful. So that was in 2021. Then fast forward to February of 2022, and again on Twitter, I saw news about this giant redevelopment plan for Jingu Gaien that a university professor had looked at the plan and determined that 1,000 trees would need to be chopped down to do it. And it had been passed by the metropolitan, sort of the planning committee, the urban planning committee of the government. And the head of the committee said, well, there's been sufficient discussion. Jubun giro no tsukushita. I'm like, there hasn't been any discussion at all. Most people are hearing about it for the first time. And I just looked at it and like, this looks really bad. And if
mm.
people were that upset about cutting off a bunch of tree limbs, how are they going to feel about 1,000 trees? So I put a little note on my Japanese Twitter and I said, this looks really bad. I think I should do another petition. What do you guys think? And everyone's like, yes, yes, yes. The peanut gallery,
Phone
yes.
blows up.
I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, I'll do a petition. And then it's just become this like, second job basically since then. It's been just crazy because unfortunately, Koike did not buckle on this one.
Mm,
And instead, she has dug in her heels. It frankly makes no sense to me. And she's in basically a political bind, and all the tabloids have been pointing it out that, people are very upset with her because not only is there this plan at Jingu Gaien, there are two other park redevelopment plans that will also sacrifice over 1,000 trees. And
right.
one is Kasai Marine Park,
Yeah.
and the other one is Hibiya Park.
So
And
these green
so there's
oases.
this
Yeah.
are very vulnerable to being developed. And in fact, I've been learning a lot about these issues in Japan this year and have discovered that parks all over Japan are being threatened by these park redevelopment plans. And the way they work is that it's a privatization scheme. And so the government will give rights to run the park to a private entity
Right.
who then has the incentive to make a profit from it. And the way they do it is by building cafes
Yeah.
or stores or
Event space.
stadiums,
Right. Yeah.
event space,
Space.
exactly, or something else that, of course, when they build those, they always end up chopping down trees instead.
Yeah, because you need to have a flat open space where people can bring their tents, they can bring their, food trucks and things like that.
Or whatever it is, yes.
Yeah.
They want to stick stuff in parks. And, the thing is for developers in Japan, because plots are very small, When they want to do something like a Roppongi Hills or other development, it's usually very difficult for developers because they have to assemble all these small pieces of land. They have to
Yeah.
negotiate with all of the landholders. It's a big pain in the neck.
Yes.
But if you have a park, you only have one entity you have to negotiate with, and that's the
Yes.
local government. And for the local government, they're like, oh, we can make money, and oh, we can look like we're doing something, and we can say, like, oh, it's going to be green oasis, even though
Yeah.
you're making a skyscraper. But
Yes.
it's very much one word I've learned recently in Japanese is yateru kan. So like, you look
やってる感.
like you're doing something.
A good new word, やってる感. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's reminding me of a previous guest on the podcast, Noemi Inoue, who
Mhm,
is a counselor in Sumidoku. And we
mhm.
recently had a redevelopment of Sumida Koen. And exactly what you said, trees were knocked out, beautiful sakura trees were knocked down. And now we have this Mizumachi cafes, and then there's this big concrete area so that we can have festivals. But because trees don't make money.
Right,
Right?
exactly,
Trees,
exactly.
trees don't make
Although
money.
actually the thing that I've also discovered is that there is an entire branch of study out that is almost completely unknown in Japan
Mm.
about the value that trees bring. And I've even seen academic studies that have given a dollar amount
Ooh.
for each thing that a tree in an urban setting does. And the largest dollar amount is for controlling water runoff. But also, trees have a cooling effect.
Yep.
They also absorb CO2 and they absorbed air pollution. And also, there's a great number of studies that show the mental health impacts of having trees, including one study in Japan that showed that risk for suicide was lower if you lived near a park.
Wow.
So there's a lot of compelling sort of academic study data on the value of trees for a variety of different purposes. And when I Google in English value of urban trees, I mean, you just get, hundreds and hundreds of links and studies.
Yeah.
If you Google in Japanese, Toshi Jumoku no Kachi, same thing,
Yeah.
almost nothing comes up.
Right.
So it's like a field of study that's almost unknown in Japan. And
Mm.
so because of that, what we see is governments think that trees are just disposable and don't value them. And there's a lot of other troubles with um, unnecessarily cutting down street trees. And this
Yeah.
year, Osaka is going to cut down 10,000 trees.
Yeah.
They
But
say they're dangerous.
no one's cutting down the sugi, and we've all got kafunsho. We've all got
Exactly. No,
the
if you're
cedar
going to cut
trees.
down trees, those
Trees.
would be the ones to cut down. And
Yes,
somehow
the
that's
ones
not happening, right?
which are causing. Yeah, the wrong trees
It's
are being
definitely the
cut
wrong
down.
trees. Yeah, the Sugi ones would be ones. Yeah, there's a lot of issues with those, with the forests that have been built. The bottom dropped out of the Japanese forestry market when they started letting imports in the 80s. And so there's no economic incentive to harvest all those Sugi trees. And so that's why we
Mm.
have the big buildup.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the thing about the Japanese economy is I feel like money gets spent on the wrong stuff.
Mm. Right. And so this redevelopment is one of those for you.
Yes, yes,
Um,
exactly.
so you said, if I'd asked you like 5 years ago, Rochelle, activist, how's that hanging? You said you'd never have believed it. Like what was it that was maybe the catalyst for you to move from someone should do something to like that's going to be me?
I just sort of thought, what the heck? Why don't I give it a try? There's nothing stopping me. I work for myself. It's not, none of my clients are really going to care that I'm doing this or not, and they don't seem to. Um, and someone said, say something, and why don't I just speak up? I mean, that was just really my thought.
Yeah, just that. I think it's really powerful to people when they move from that someone should to, well, if not me, then who? And
Right,
that's such
exactly. No one
a
else is going to do
person.
anything about it, right? And
Yeah.
I sort of like, what do I have to lose to try?
Yeah. And as you said, like you're uniquely placed because you have this big Twitter following. You've worked in this area. You've been active in this environmental urban redevelopment area before. So you've got connections and credibility around it.
I won't say that. Before I did the thing with Yogi Cohen,
Mm,
I had been involved in sort of protesting environmental things 3 times, but that was over the course of probably 30 years. So
right.
it's not like it was a big part of my life, but it is something that I had done successfully a few times. But I didn't have any connections or anything like that, or didn't really have any kind of guidebook, but I had done a couple times. And so that
Yeah.
did give me some confidence, I guess.
Right.
The first time was when I was working in Japan in my 20s. I was working at a Japanese bank, and actually, my job was doing international public relations for that bank.
Mm,
So I've had some experience in PR, and I had done work in PR in my first job out of college in the US too. And so I had some experience in that field. And there was a plan to build a parking lot underneath Shinobazu Pond in Ueno.
right.
Which, just imagine that. Is that insane or what? And of course, that would just completely destroy this delicate ecosystem of that pond, and it would have killed it, right?
Yeah.
And so it was this crazy plan, and a bunch of people locally were involved, and this gal named Elizabeth Curitani, who lived in that area, was involved, and she had given a talk about it to a foreign women's group that one of my friends belonged to. And so my friend told me about, oh, I just heard about all this thing and this gal Curitani-san, and she's working on it, and she's like, Rochelle, you have all this, knowledge of how to do PR and the foreign press. Could you help us try and publicize this? And I said, sure, I'd be willing to give it a try. And what I was able to do is I reached out to a bunch of journalists, and there was a guy who wrote a column for the Japan Times about wild birds, like bird watching.
Right.
And he's an author. He's still out there. I think he lives in Hokkaido or something. He writes books about wild birds of Japan. He was I think his
Very
best
niche.
bestseller.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's very niche. But he had a column in the Japan Times once a
Mm,
month. And so I contacted him and I told him about this plan. And he's like, that is just the worst idea I've ever heard. And Shinobazu Pond is a valuable place for bird watchers. It's a
yeah.
place where wild birds come. It's an oasis for them. So he wrote a half-page article in the Japan Times. And this is back when I think newspapers were a little bit larger than they were now. So a half page was pretty big.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this also was pre-internet. I'm dating myself,
Yeah.
but at that time, what was in the Japan Times was kind of a big deal. And so he wrote his entire column for that month, raging against this plan and how bad an idea it was. And of course, in parallel, there were lots of other protests and things going on, but soon after that, the plan disappeared.
Huh.
So that was a taste of, oh, I could make a difference on things.
Yeah.
So I had that pretty early experience pretty early on.
Yeah. What's that word? I can't remember it. About outside pressure in Japan.
Gaiatsu.
Gaiatsu.
Yeah, I'm definitely playing that role on this Jingu Gaien thing. I'm
Mm,
Gaiatsu personified.
yeah.
Because a
So
lot of
can you
people are saying, why is this foreigner talking about this? So many people say, well, we Japanese should be speaking up about this. I'm I kind of feel again, it kind of gets into what's our role as non-Japanese in Japanese society.
yeah.
But I feel it's easier for me to speak up. I don't
Mm,
have a compunction about doing it. Part of that is because I'm American, it's my culture.
right?
Part of it's my personality. I'm used to being a consultant and a board member. I'm used to people listening to me, so I have some confidence about saying stuff. And then the other thing is as I said, I work for myself.
Right.
So, it's I think a lot of the Japanese activists who are involved in what we're doing like they don't want their names to put out because they're afraid their company might not approve of it.
Right.
And I don't work for a Japanese company. I don't have that issue. So
Yeah. You don't need to
that
go to the CEO for approval. Can I be doing this? Or,
no, 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 no. Or I
no.
don't have to worry about being hauled in and being,
Pre-stamped,
exactly,
pre-approved.
exactly. Yes, because one of my good Japanese friends, when I started, she's like, Rochelle, you're so brave, and I never thought about it as being brave, but that was
Mm,
her perspective. And
right.
I've had other Japanese people use that word also, and I'm like, well, that it doesn't feel scary to me. It doesn't feel like I needed bravery, but it's very interesting that a lot of Japanese I know have used that word.
Right. I really like that perspective on this idea of like what's the role that I can uniquely play because of my like outsider status.
Yes.
And yeah, I think that's a great inquiry, isn't it? Like people saying like, oh, you're so brave, but there's less risk. So as
And
non-Japanese, well,
I'm
yeah,
not bound by the sort of the strictures of Japanese society. It
yeah,
makes it easier for me to deal with people. I've been interacting with a lot of politicians and a lot of people from various parts of the political spectrum, and I'm like, I'm neutral. I don't vote in Japan. I don't have a favorite party. Um, so that's again, it's I can play a little bit of a different role.
wonderful. So that's a call in for listeners to think about like what are the roles that you are uniquely set to play in your
Right.
community, whatever identities that you carry, and where are the things where you can be that catalyst, you can take that action. Whilst you're, involved in all of this activism, what are you learning about yourself and your sense of ikigai, of who you are,
Mm.
why you're here?
That's a good question. Well, again, it's a good chance to reflect on, what role can I play in Japanese society?
Mm,
It's been very interesting for me because it's another way of kind of pursuing what's really been my lifelong interest is understanding how things work in Japan
ah,
and what makes Japanese society tick and how you influence and get things done in Japanese organizations. And so I've been learning a tremendous amount about that. I've learned more about how things work on a government level and a sort of a national level and a political level. I work closely with a group of Japanese activists. We're a network, so we call ourselves a network. So it's not like a formal organization,
right.
but there's a bunch of people, for example, who had protested the new national stadium construction, and they had been arguing for preserving the one from 1964, and of course
Mm,
they didn't get that, but they had worked together on that. So there's a editor of an architecture magazine, and there's an architect who's an expert on preservation, and then there's local residents in the area, some of whom have been activists on other topics like nuclear power, etc. So I kind of interact with this group of Japanese activists, and so I'm the only non-Japanese, and so it's a pretty purely Japanese group dynamic setting,
right.
and it's very interesting to kind of see how they do things and the way they go about things,
Mm,
and again, I can have a different voice. And there was, at one point there was someone who people had concern about, and three of us were at I was with three of the activists, and at dinner we're talking about this, and so I'm like, well, why don't I just write him an email and ask him that? And they're like, go for it, American Woman. And then they started humming, that American Woman, that song for the 70s. And so they were just joking. They're like, yeah, go do that because we don't feel comfortable doing that. But you can do that because of who you are. You get like a pass for doing it.
right.
So I could ask a fairly direct question to someone that they didn't feel comfortable doing.
Mm. So that's
It's
still
been very interesting.
even within this like loose network, it doesn't have, a hierarchical leadership or maybe this kind of you know, there's none of the stakes of being in an organization and thinking about your career future. Still that tendency to, you know, maintain the work, keep the harmony, avoid direct
Oh,
conflict
it's
and
all there,
feedback.
yeah. It's all
Yeah.
there, and to go forward, you need to get consensus, and it can take a lot of time to build consensus, and we have very long meetings to try and build consensus, and
Yeah.
lots of emails. So it's again, it's fascinating to see how they work.
Mm.
And also, I've just learned so much more about how things work in the Japanese government.
Right.
It's not always pretty. And in fact, yesterday I was just tweeting in Japanese. There's no, I put it in my English too. There was just the report out on Japan being fairly low on the press freedom index. And the
Mm.
reason they gave for it was that there's a lot of pressure both from the government and from business to not report things that are not in their interest. I'm like, okay, I have a much stronger perspective on this now that I have directly experienced that happening,
Right.
including what appeared to have been my getting yanked off an internet TV show immediately prior. It seemed pretty likely that the developer called them up and told them not to have me
Right.
on.
Wow. Wow. Because they
Yeah.
happen to be a sponsor of this channel and
Well, yeah,
right.
then
Yeah.
the developer has been, Mitsui Fudosan has been throwing their weight around and spending a lot of money on advertising. And, you know, I don't have a TV. I don't like watching TV, but people watch TV say that their commercials have become ubiquitous and annoying
Right.
because they're just trying to show the TV stations, guess where your money's coming from?
Right. So maybe you don't
Yeah.
want to cover this story so much.
Yes, exactly.
Interesting. Yeah. I was going to ask a question, you know, because one of the you know, often when I'm talking about ikigai, I'm like nice things and let's like follow the things which make us happy. Obviously this is very like challenging and stressful, so how do you like keep yourself motivated in this sort of David and Goliath um environment? You know, what keeps you going?
Righteous indignation. And in
Right,
fact,
just
the more I've gotten into this, I it really is just, I mean, it's sort of appalling to see, you know, I'm listening to environmental assessment committees, and the developer, the way they talk to the committee, it's clear like they just view it as a formality, and this is such an annoyance, and
mm,
like their whole tone, and then like the city is like not even listening to its own environmental assessment committee, and the committee had said we're not ready to give this a green light, and the city pushed it through anyways. You know, it's just really, it's pretty like running roughshod, and you know, not in the spirit of the law. We'll see
right,
if it's illegal or not. We launched a lawsuit to try and test it, because what some of the stuff they're doing, it's pretty borderline
right.
sketchy.
Yeah, and
And
it's
so
the
it just
precedent,
seemed,
right?
yeah, yeah, and so yeah, it's just it's basically been appalling, and
Mm.
so definitely the righteous indignation. Like I don't they can't get away with this. It's just nuts.
Look, I've got like goosebumps as you sharing this because one of the I've forgotten who the researcher is, so I'll have to look for this and put this in the show notes later on. But they talk about three types of ikigai. So one is sort of personal ikigai, like it's about yourself, self-improvement, maybe your faith or like belief, taking care of your health. One is social ikigai, so helping other people.
Hmm.
You know, this type of activism is one. And then another one is what they call like antisocial ikigai. And
Hmm.
righteous indignation is a form of antisocial ikigai. It's like getting
Hmm.
revenge. People can't get away with this. I'm not going to let this happen. I'll show them they were wrong about me. Um, and a lot of like ikigai literature and discussion focuses on the social and the sort of personal, those ideas. But I actually think this antisocial ikigai, like being driven to a degree by rage, by righteous indignation, by I'm not going to let these people win, like waking up to have to go to that battle, metaphorical battle, is it's a source of ikigai. You know, your blood is
Yeah.
pumping, you are very aware that you are alive.
Yes, it's true.
Something is happening.
I definitely have a competitive streak.
Right.
I was a coxswain in college, so I did a competitive sport, even though I'm not a very athletic person. The coxswain is more, you in a crew team,
Yeah.
you're directing the boat,
Nice.
etc.
Yeah.
I was a lot skinnier then, so I wasn't such a big weight on the boat. But I definitely have like a competitive streak, and it's not something that I really use in my typical career. A
Mm.
couple times I've been called on in the United States to be an expert witness in lawsuits.
Wow.
And that's like really you're competitive, and like I'm like tearing apart the other side's logic and whatever, and um it's a battle. And so I've done kind of well for my clients in a couple situations like that, where I was able to really like help them have a much stronger case and win. So I kind of, I sometimes I enjoy the fight a little bit. So, I
Yeah.
think there is part of me that likes that. And the
Yeah.
other thing I think of too is, I'm Jewish, and there is a idea in the Jewish faith called tikkun olam, which is repair the world. So the
Ooh.
idea is the world is not perfect, it's broken, and you have a responsibility to do what you can to try and make the world better. So
Wow.
this is a reason why a lot of people who are Jewish go into professions like teaching or social work or like doctors.
Mm.
So there's a reason that those are kind of popular, because there is a thing in the faith that kind of says, you should do this.
Right.
And so I'm one of these people who's Jewish. So I never go to temple. I don't really, I eat pork and shrimp all the time. I'm not really into the ritual things, but I do think the values are very important to me, and so
Right.
that's a really big Jewish value. And I think um, it's not like I'm doing this because I'm Jewish, but I do think that that idea forms part of my worldview.
I love that. Repair the world. What a great sort of call to action and call
Hmm.
to use those tools that you have, whatever they might be.
Right. It's an
Um,
idea of that everyone has a personal responsibility to actually do something about things that they see that are not good.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'm thinking where I need to repair the world. Love it. Um, so we're coming towards the end of our time together, and I'm sure that you have other places to go and things to do as this many things are going on in your life. But I always ask the same two questions at the end of my podcast. So the first question is, what is a question that I haven't asked you that I should have asked you?
Okay, so I guess one question might be, if people are interested in trying to help me save this little corner of the world, what can they do? And so, what I would say is, our petition is still accepting signatures, and the more the merrier. So that's going to be in the notes. And so, if people could sign that, that would be a huge help, and tell other people as well.
Yeah. So when you get that pop up that says, would you like to share this on social media? Definitely yes, 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 after you've
Yes,
signed it.
please do. Yes, the
Yeah.
more that we can get the word out in social media, the better.
Mm.
So if you can tell people about this, tell people about this podcast, tell people about the petition. Google, there are now articles that have come out in English. So AP, the Newswire service, has done a couple articles already. The New York Times did an article at the end of April about Jingu Stadium, which is the historical
Yes.
stadium that's going to be raised as part of this plan.
Mm.
For people who know American baseball, it's like a Wrigley Field or a Fenway Park. It's very historical, and they're
Yeah.
just going to like tear it down and throw it out.
Right.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
it's so. Anyways, there's an article about that that just came out in the New
Yeah.
York Times.
So it's not just the trees, it's also the history of
It's
baseball, which is actually the national sport in Japan. People talk about sumo,
yes,
but baseball is the
right,
national sport
exactly.
of Japan.
And there was a survey of Japanese baseball fans, and they said that Jingu Stadium was their second favorite stadium. Why
Wow.
would you just tear down the second favorite stadium in the country? It's just crazy.
Yeah. What's the favorite stadium? Is it
What,
Tokyo Dome?
Yokohama.
Yokohama. Oh,
Yes, I thought that was interesting. And Koshien, I think, was number 3 or 4.
right. Yeah, which have got
Yeah.
these like, I can see the Koshien with its, again, like historical background. It's part
Right.
of the culture.
Right. Well, the
So,
thing is about Koshien is that it's actually older than Jingu Stadium,
mm,
and it was recently renovated beautifully. And the renovation won awards, and they did it during the off season, so it didn't interrupt the baseball season.
right.
So so the I'm learning also lots of Japanese vocabulary through this process, and one of them is rokyuka, which means like old or decrepit or outmoded. And it's basically a word that developers use to slap on something that they want an excuse to tear down. So
Mm,
they've deemed Jingu Stadium rokyuka, but there's no reason why it couldn't be renovated. They
yeah.
renovated Fenway and Wrigley, and they renovated Koshien. No reason
Yeah.
you couldn't do the same thing.
Having those, I understand, there's a lot of challenges because, of course, earthquake structure, the requirements have
Oh,
changed. Of course, it's
it's
more
already been
expensive.
earthquake
Yeah.
proofed. Jingu
Right.
Stadium was earthquake proofed in 2016.
Right. So that's a pretty recent,
Yeah,
yeah. So there's
yeah, it's
where
pretty
there's a
recent.
will, there's
Yeah,
a way. Right. So yes.
exactly. Yes,
Yeah.
but
So
they haven't
finding
even looked at it. And in fact, I was at a meeting with officials from the government that was related to the rugby stadium. The rugby stadium is actually owned by the Japan Sports Council, which is part of the sports agency, which is part of the Ministry of Education.
mm,
And so there was a meeting with government officials last year, and that was related to the rugby stadium because there's this national role. And I asked the government representatives, at any point, did you do a study comparing costs and benefits of rebuilding the stadium versus renovating it? And they said no. Like, how could you not even do that type of basic comparison? It was just completely assuming, well, we're just going to redevelop it without
mm,
even examining the possibility of restoring it. And with global warming, et cetera, scholars say that it's much better for the environment to reuse existing buildings than to tear them down and build new ones.
yeah.
And so, unfortunately, Japan is addicted to what they call scrap and build. They use the
Mm,
English words for it, of just tearing stuff down and rebuilding it. And it's a really bad habit that basically the Japanese government and the Japanese construction companies and economy are stuck in, of tearing things down and rebuilding them. And it doesn't make sense environmentally anymore.
yeah. There's very, very few on the old buildings around. Like, yeah. And as soon as,
And
yeah, we're in a new build and already I know that no other family will live in this house. After we we slip off this mortal coil, it will be knocked down. No one else will live here and it will be rebuilt because I see it happening all around me. I live
oh
in
yeah, of course, yeah.
the Shitamachi,
Uh-huh.
and there are some people who are trying to do things to like retain, renovate the old Nagaya and things like that. So just
Yeah.
really feeling the value of individual efforts to repair the world,
Right.
to reuse, to
Hmm.
recycle the world, and to like get together with that network of other people and everyone like using those different unique skills and talents that they have. And maybe it's something that, like you said, your friend commented, "Oh, you're so brave." Well, I didn't realize that this was a brave thing to do. This is something which is easy and natural for me to do. So it might be listeners may have talents or resources or just ways of being that feel very normal to them, but are actually quite unique and special. And it's not how other people operate. So sort
Right.
of don't take them for granted.
No,
Um,
that's a really good point. So that kind of goes in that you're good at it quadrant of the Ikigai. There may
yeah,
be things that feel so natural to you, you don't even realize that it's a talent that you have.
yeah. Like, oh, cool. That's a thing. People not do that. I thought that was normal. Yes.
Yes.
So it's good to get that feedback and be surprised by it. And so my final question for you, though, Rochelle, before we wrap up today, a final message for you. Maybe it's a call to repair the world, or something else. A final message you'd like to give listeners of Ikigai with Jennifer Shinkai.
Well, I definitely want to encourage everyone to think about what are the things that they really care about, and to not be afraid to speak up about those things.
Yeah, love that. So just to spend that consideration and then, yeah, voice
Yeah.
it, take the
And
step.
not hesitate.
Yes, wonderful. And as we had said, in when we were chatting beforehand, sometimes that you're not quite ready at the time for the opportunity. And if if this had happened to you when you were 20 years old, maybe you wouldn't be getting all of these in TV interviews and 200,000 signatures and making such an impact. So these things which can be our source of our ikigai, they show up in surprising ways, and they may not be something that we planned.
Right.
And the world kind of presents those opportunities for us. So as you said, like, do I care about it? Yes. Therefore, I'm going to do something about it.
And I think what you really have to do is you have to listen to that inner voice that says that it is something I care about.
Yeah,
What do you feel about it? And for me, I've just sort of felt really natural. Hey, this is something I want to spend time on, and so I just listened to that voice that I had.
wonderful. I love that. That's a great closing message, to listen to the voice. And thank you to everyone who's listened to Rochelle's voice today. I'm sure you're all going to go off and sign the petition and maybe take a look on change.org or other platforms to see what's something that I can get involved with. And, signing the petition is one step. But there's definitely other ways that you can be involved in this project as a volunteer or in something else which is the inner voice is calling you to. So I hope that people come away from the end of this podcast feeling inspired to take some action and repair the world. That's my takeaway for today. So thank you so much, Rochelle.
Okay.
Really appreciate it. And
Thanks so much, Jennifer. This has
thank
been
you.
great.
Good luck. I hope you win.
Thank you.
Thank you.